Ever had this problem? You get in your car and it's either a sauna or an ice box. Super annoying. But what if your car could precondition itself to the perfect temperature before you even get in? That's exactly what we'll build today with a Home Assistant automation. And we will not just use a simple timer for that, but we will use the distance between the car and its owner to realize that. Let's jump right in.
Smart home maker, rock the beat. Innovation at your feet. Build it up, don't complicate. Home solutions, you're the mate.
What do we need to get this project started? Well, in this case, it's not so complicated. First of all, we need a Home Assistant installation to create the automations in. Then we need a connected car, which also reports its position to the cloud and which allows to activate the stationary air condition remotely. And thirdly, we need an integration of our connected car into Home Assistant. Now let me explain the basic concept of how everything should work. The idea is that we constantly track the distance between the car on the one side and the user or the users on the other side. And then whenever the user leaves a certain distance from the car and then comes back and goes below a certain threshold of distance to the car, then we should automatically activate the stationary air condition. And then we just need to add some special conditions to make sure that it will not always be activated. For example, when the car sits in front of our house and we walk around within the house, of course, then it should not be activated. So in this case, I would add the condition: do not activate it when we are home, and also do not activate it while we are at work. Because when we are at home or when we are at work, we can find different solutions on how to activate it. For example, you could use a simple timer. If you go to work every day at the same time in the morning, then you can just use a timer to automatically activate the stationary air conditioner at that time when you leave the house. And the same thing when you come back home. So for that, we don't need this. So first of all, I would like to show you how you can create a sensor that monitors the distance between you as a driver and your car. We have to open the configuration.yaml. You could do that using the file editor add-on or also Studio Code Server. In this case, I chose the file editor. And then you have to search for the sensor node. In my case, the sensor node includes multiple different sensor types. That's why here you cannot see the sensor node, but actually if you do not have a sensor node, then it should look like this: sensor, and then directly below the sensor node you have platform template. But in my case, as stated already up here, there are multiple more platforms, and that's why it's just another platform entry here. So we have platform template, then we have the sensors in this template platform, and this sensor is called distance between devices. You can give it whatever name you would like. Just make sure that you have made sure that the naming conventions are valid, so lowercase and with underscores. Then you give it a friendly name, and this is the friendly name you would like to read in Home Assistant, so this is important. I gave it the name distance, the smart home maker to his car. The unit of measurement is meters. And then we have a value template which actually calculates the distance. And here we do nothing more than just calculating a Euclidean distance between the two device trackers. One device tracker is the car position, in my case it's a Skoda Enyaq, and the other one is in my iPhone. So I have those device trackers already created before, and then I can just use them and calculate the latitude and longitude for both of those device trackers, or actually read it out with the state attribute function. And once I have those values, I have to check if any of those is none, because it can sometimes happen that any of those values is for a short moment none, and then the whole calculation of course is not valid, and I realized that. So if you have any of those values as none, it is kind of recognized as it would be zero. And then of course your distance gets really huge and you do not want to have that. So that's why if any of those is none, actually I return unknown. And in the other case, if every of those values has an actual latitude and longitude value, then I calculate the distance in kilometers using the distance function. And afterwards I have to convert this from kilometers to meters in my case. So distance kilometers multiplied by 1000 to convert it to meters and then round it. And then I return distance meters into this value template. And that's already it. If you now save and restart Home Assistant, you should be able to already monitor your distance between the car and you. Now I would like to give you a quick overview of how the data that is being generated by this sensor actually looks like. If I go into history and Home Assistant and then open the sensor entity, we can see how the data looks like. And yeah, what we can see here is it is not super accurate, but it is really interestingly accurate, to be honest. So what you can see here is a whole day, because I'm using this sensor already since a while. So here you can see that there was a time yesterday at a certain time when I drove to work, then I arrived at work, and then I was like walking around in the office. So you see there was a certain distance to the car. Then I sat in my office for a while, was working there. Then I went to lunch. It's really interesting. Then I worked in the office again, and then at some point I drove home. So I was sitting in the car, driving home, arrived home, exited the car, was in the kitchen, which is very close to the car actually, etc. Then I was probably somewhere upstairs with the kids, bring them to bed, and went downstairs and at some point go to bed. So it's really interesting what you can see here. And then now this is the morning. I woke up, walked through the house, then I went to make a coffee, etc. So you see it is really interestingly accurate, to be honest, and you can read a lot of data out of this, but most important is that you can quite accurately calculate the distance between you and your car. And now you really have to make sure that you have the correct threshold for the distance for when you would like to activate the climatization. And now finally, let's look into the automation that will make sure that when you get close to your car, it will automatically turn on the air condition. So in my case, I defined that when the distance the car to me is below 20, then check if my location, which is the location of my phone, is not in home or Arbeit. Arbeit means work. So make sure that we are not in one of those zones. And if that's the case, so we are not at work and not at home, then turn on the air conditioner. So I just turn on climate device and then I can select my air conditioning from the car integration. That's it. Bonus tip. If you think it's kind of spooky if the automation will automatically turn on the climatization and you would like to take control over that, then we can use a so-called actionable notification. So that means it will not automatically turn it on, but it will send you a push notification that tells you, hey, you're getting close to your car. Would you now like to turn on the climatization of your car? And then you have a button right at the notification so that you can directly say, yes, I would like to turn it on. And only if you press that button, then the climatization will be turned on. And to do this, we need to add two different triggers to our automation. The first trigger is the same than before. Once you reach this distance threshold of, for example, 20 meters to your car, you have this first trigger, and here we have to add a so-called trigger ID. You can get this by clicking on the three dots and then choose Edit ID. Then you give it a name, for example, threshold reached. And then we have a second trigger, and that's once you have actually pressed that button on that notification. And here we would say when mobile app notification event is fired. So you add a manual event and then you give it also a trigger ID, for example, confirmed by clicking Edit ID. And you have to set the event type to mobile app notification action. And in the event data, you have to type action, and then an action name. For example, confirmed turn on car climatization. And then the same thing than before. We only do this once we are in the zone, not in our home and not at work. And then we choose between the two different actions. So if it is triggered by threshold reached, then not automatically start the climatization, but send out a push notification. So you can have the condition to only run this part here if the trigger threshold reached has been triggering the automation, and then the action is, for example, you send a push notification which says you are approaching your car, shall climatization be turned on. Title could be turn on climatization, and the most important part is in the data. You have to set actions colon, and then the action is confirmed turn on car climatization. This is the action name that we have also put in the trigger, and you give it a title, for example, yes, turn it on. This is the text which is shown on that button in the notification. And you can see here that this is a list, so you could add even more different buttons, but for this specific type of automation, it makes no sense to add more than one button from my point of view. And then we have the second option, if it is triggered by confirmed, so that means the button has been actually pressed, we receive this event, then only then turn on the climatization. And here's a short kind of bonus tip. In my case, I realized that the updates of the device tracker of my iPhone were not so frequently. So sometimes I would get closer to my car, but actually the sensor would not update, and then also the distance would not update. So that's why I have created a new helper automation which once per minute forces an update on the entity device tracker iPhone. So in this case, this ensures that the updates of the location and therefore also of the distance will be performed more frequently. You can play around with this. Of course, you should not drain your battery of your phone, but for me this works quite well now. I hope this solution helps you, that you never have to sweat or freeze in your car again. If you liked such videos, then please subscribe to my channel. See you next time!